My fellow Americans, I'm pleased to tell you today that I've signed legislation that will outlaw Russia forever. We begin bombing in 5 minutes.
We will not prematurely or unnecessarily risk the course of worldwide nuclear war, in which even the fruits of victory would be ashes in our mouth. But neither will we shrink from that risk at any time it must be faced.
Hey, it's Tom from Texas, and it's time for another floppy deep dive. And today we are doing one of the Many Faces series. And with the Many Faces series, what I do is I look at all the different systems, a specific game. And today we're looking at Raid Over Moscow. And Raid Over Moscow was a huge game back in the 1980s, one of the best sellers, had impact on even real life and governments itself, this game. And it's amazing how something like this can actually have an impact on people in society. This was all during the Cold War. Of course, there was Reagan and Gorbachev and Margaret Thatcher, and this was the time where even in school, in elementary school, I can remember us practicing. If a nuclear war happened, you go out in the hallway and put your head between your legs and your hands over your head, and same exact thing you would do for a tornado, you would do for a nuclear strike, the Cold War. And so this game came out huge, Moscow attacking the United States, and then everything that happened along the way. So we're going to be looking at different systems today. I've got 3 of them hooked up here. I've got the Amiga 500 version, I've got the Commodore 64 version, and I've got the Atari 800 XL version behind me. We're also going to look at the BBC Micro. Got some help from Steve Judson on that one. Check out his YouTube page here. And another one that we also going to be looking at is the Spectrum, ZX Spectrum, and we're going to be looking at the Amstrad version of Raid Over Moscow. So if you haven't seen our other Many Faces version, we've looked at Karateka, Bruce Lee, Donkey Kong, Summer Games, and Maniac Mansion, just to name a few. So go check out those videos if you haven't seen them yet. But let's go ahead and dive into Raid Over Moscow.
So now let's look at the 7 systems that we're going to be looking at today. And Raid Over Moscow originally was released in 1984 on the Commodore 64 before it was ported over to these other systems. So next we've got the Atari, which came out in 1986, the Apple II that came out in 1984, the ZX Spectrum came out in 1985, the BBC Micro came out in 1986, the Amiga 500 version came out in 2020, and the Amstrad version came out in 1985. So those are all the systems. In the video following up from here where you see the screens, it'll be in the exact same order that these systems are in right now. So let's go ahead and check that out. So now let's look at this, and we got up here on the top left hand side, that's the original Commodore 64 where I'm walking to the plane, and that's the only version that they actually walked to the plane until the Amiga came out in 2020 where they did it, but all the other versions when they ported it over didn't have the fighter walking out to the plane. So I just thought that was a little bit interesting. So then in the middle we've got the Atari 800 version, and again this is just them flying out of the hangar here. And then we've got the Apple II, that's the 3rd one on the top here. And then in the middle section on the left hand side we have the ZX Spectrum version. And then on the right hand side we've got the BBC Micro. And on the bottom we have the Amiga 500 version, which like I said just came out in 2020, just so recently made. They were started making it back originally, but then they stopped. They didn't get very far along, but then it finally did get released in 2020. And then last over here is the Amstrad version of them getting out of the hangar, and you can see all the different variety of colors. The big thing about the Amstrad that's different is it always has the vibrant colors, and I like that. The BBC Micro above it there, it also has some very unique colors to the whole thing. But just checking out the overview, what I did is I tried to go into each of the games and show you each of the stages. Because Raid Over Moscow has 3 different stages that you go to, you always start off in the hangar stage, where you got to fly out and you got to figure out how to open that door. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to figure out, is if you didn't have the manual, you had to figure out how to open that hangar door and get out of there. But once you get all those out, then you go and you start doing your fly across, where you're got to take out the different things in a low orbit while you got a missile that's chasing you. And then finally you'll get to a missile silo that you've got to take out. So it's a lot of back and forth, and the biggest thing that was a little bit of variety was just, if you could just look at the different ones, is just the graphic wise and how the orientation of the play went. Apple II was the only one that was a little bit different. When instead of going from left to right, you were actually going up. So it was a whole different perspective of when you played the Apple II that I found really unique and different. And then there's the second stage, where you became basically the foot soldiers, and now you are using a mortal and you got to blast open the correct doors of it. And that's randomly chosen from 5 that are available. So you'd go in there and you shoot the door, and once the door is open, you make your way to the nuclear reactor, which then is the third stage. And then in the third stage, you have to destroy the maintenance robots that feed the coolant into the reactor. So you get to use the different discs to be able to bounce them off the walls and hit the robot. So I tried to show as many of the different levels and the different versions of the game. Unfortunately, I didn't get to show all of them and all the different systems, because I just wasn't good enough to get to that level. But in a lot of them I did. So in the videos following now, you're going to see up close much more detail, and show you as much of the levels that I have. If I'd had all 3 stages, I showed you all 3 stages. I only got it to a couple. I showed you the couple, but just wanted to give you the overview and comment on how the play was. So let's go ahead and do that. So first we're going to be checking out Raid Over Moscow on the Commodore 64. And so this is the version that I'm most comfortable with and played the most. And you can see you start off, you have your guy walking out, like I said, is only done in the original Commodore 64 version. And you're starting off, you're up to here in space, and you've got a hangar up here where your space planes are stored. And you got to fly them out of this hangar and hopefully not crash into the door. And then go down here, because right now they've got missiles targeting Denver, and it's going to take out Denver. And you got to go take out that site to stop that strike from happening. So you're basically flying down here, and then you will do the next action, which is going from left to right. And this is where you've got that heat-seeking missile following you, and you could go up and down and control your different perspective of while you're flying, taking out as much stuff as you can. You got to just maneuver through all these different parts. Of course, the clock is ticking this whole time, where the nuclear weapon's fixing to strike, so it's got the time to impact down at the bottom. So once you get past this part here, now you got to go in there and you got to take out these sight missile silos here. And the middle one's the main one that you got to take out. These other ones are good for bonus points and so forth, but the main one is that middle one that you're going to want. And there it goes, the launch site has been destroyed. And now this is stage 2 that I mentioned. So here at stage 2, they basically, now you got to go in here and you must blast the correct door to the facility. And you also could take out those guys along the wall. But I just wanted to show what it looked like on the Commodore version, so when we see the other versions, you can have something to compare to. And then after that, you've got the last stage. This is the third stage, where you have to destroy the maintenance robots, and that they're the ones that feed the coolant in the reactor. And the number of robots that you have depends on which difficulty level you choose when you first start. But you got several disc grenades that you throw at the robot, which is moving and firing at him the whole time. And you want to try to catch those discs when they return, because you only have a limited number. So when they're coming back, if you can catch them, you can save them. And I always thought this level was fun. It's hard to get to, but once you get here, I thought it was fun. And it definitely reminds me a lot of the Beachhead, of course, made by the same people who made the Raid Over Moscow. So now we're going to look at the Atari version. And the Atari version I liked a lot. It was fun, and it's definitely different. It has more of a pink and blue. Again, we didn't walk out of that hangar. Again, you got to get your ships out, and then here's the next stage. Perspective is the exact same as the Commodore 64. The graphics has more colors. It actually, to me, looks better than the Commodore 64. More detailed. And with the Commodore 64 being the original, that's what I compare everything to see. But really liked the play of it. I thought this part of the version was fun to do. That heat-seeking missile drives me nuts, but all part of the fun. And again, now here's the second stage for the Atari version. Again, trying to take out the guys along the wall. Very similar to the Commodore version, how it looks, how it plays. I'm interested what systems you guys played it on the most versus, the Commodore 64 like I did. Again, now here's the third stage, and then taking out the reactor and throwing those discs. So I'm able to show you on the first two that I was able to get to all the different stages so you could see them. Definitely a different color, different look than the Commodore 64 that we originally looked at. But I liked it. I liked the Atari version. I think it looks good. I think they did a good porting from the Commodore over to the Atari. It was a fun one to play. Now this next one is distinctly Apple II, right? The colors, they always have the red, white, and blue different colors when it comes to the Apple II. The sounds aren't as good as the other systems, very generic sounding from the Apple II. I know a lot of people grew up on the Apple II or played with them at school and so forth. And like I mentioned, here's the big part that was different. Now we're going up in this level, and it's the only system that where you went up in this level, which I found really interesting, just because it was different. And that's why I like doing this, the mini faces, being able to play the different levels and check out the different things, just to see what other people saw when they played Raid Over Moscow, what's in their head when they had Apple II versus mine when I had the Commodore 64. I actually found going up seemed easier to me than going from left to right. But again, the sounds are very much very generic. And of course, this is the silo part where you got to take out that middle silo to take out the reactor. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to sound like I'm putting down the Apple II, because I actually enjoyed playing it, and I respect it for what it is. And that was it. That's as far. I couldn't show you the other stages. I didn't get that far. So next we're going to go and look at the ZX Spectrum. And of course the Spectrum always has the different graphics, but I always enjoy seeing how they came out with the games and how they had their own unique. And they actually handled Raid Over Moscow really, really well, I thought. The graphics aren't bad at all. Typical ZX Spectrum, style graphics, but the graphics actually look pretty cool. Gameplay is fun. This part is just as challenging as the Commodore 64 or the Atari. Sounds, of course, I don't think is as good as the Commodore or the Atari, but like I said, the ZX Spectrum is its own unique system, so I always find it very cool just to see how they did it, and they actually did it really, really well. I like their silo system here. It actually looks pretty cool. I like the different colors. Looks different with having that 3 versus how the other systems that we saw where they're taking these out look. So I thought they did a really good job here. So, and here's stage 2. So on the second stage, again, you got the guys along the wall. This looks really good to me too, for ZX Spectrum and the colors and everything. I thought looked awesome. I thought it was a little easier than some of the other systems doing this part. I love their explosions in this version. And then of course this is the third stage, so again, throwing the disc. I thought out of all of them, this probably was the part that I didn't like as much as I did like on the other systems. But still very much playable. And good shot there. So overall, I give it a thumbs up. So let's look at this next system that we're going to be looking at now. And this is the BBC Micro. And this is the one that I had Steve Judson helped me with. He has a BBC Micro that he could play it, so I asked him to put his game playing skills and see what he could do for me. So he actually did really good, and I've never seen anything. I've never even played the BBC Micro, so him doing that for me helped me out a lot. Again, check out his YouTube channel that I mentioned in the beginning. He's got good stuff on there to check out, different repairs and gaming reviews also. Now this definitely looks a lot different. I think the ZX Spectrum looks better than this version, but unique, you know. I just love how they had the colors are so different, have more of that thin paved way, like the road, the blue right in the middle, so the green is just completely off limits on the top and the bottom, and you just stay in this blue section. The heat-seeking missile to me looked like a fish. So this is their silo version, much different than the silo we just saw with the ZX Spectrum, right? It's lack of colors and so forth. And then here's the second stage, so you could get an idea, and it actually looks pretty good for what they did with it. The other versions I prefer, and I prefer the explosions better, but oh, he's out. You gotta watch those guys along the walls trying to take you out. And that was pretty cool. Now this is the Amiga version, so they brought back the pilot walking through the plane. And this is back to me playing again. And I haven't played this a lot. In fact, I just got it, so when I was making this video, I was learning how to do it. I love, obviously, the music's great, the sounds are great, the graphics are great. The play was very authentic to the original Commodore 64 version. Again, you gotta figure out how to open those doors so you don't crash. I found it hard. I found the other ones that I could get a lot farther. And this one, I could only show you this first stage. I never did get to that second stage. But I finally did figure out how to open up the hangar door and fly out the door. So I think that's a win right there. But I'm going to play this one some more. I love having it on the Amiga 500, and I love my Amiga 500. They just did so great things, and I love that they're still, coming out with stuff in 2020. Still came out with a game. So just very cool. And here's the other part. It's still part of the first stage, so you can see an idea. Very, very true to life to the Commodore 64, the layout, the graphics. But I enjoyed it. Like I said, didn't get very far, but wanted to show a little bit of the Amiga version. Now this last one here is the Amstrad. And the Amstrad, like I said, I'm a huge fan. I'd love to get my hands on an Amstrad system. I just think it looks so amazing. I love the colors. I love it's just such a unique system, and just looking at it, I think it would be very cool. But the big thing that I wanted to point out on this one is they didn't call it Raid Over Moscow. After a while, they just called it Raid. And they changed the name, so you no longer have the real New York, Denver, Dallas, Washington, D.C. They just have made-up names, and then they also have made-up names over in Russia. So they kind of made it more tame, so not to offend anybody. So it's more, even though it came out in the 80s, it's more PC compliant, not hurting anybody's feelings. We don't want to be like Finland, where the Russians asked them not to sell it at all, and of course that made everybody want it and made it a bestseller in Finland. But it's just cool. It looks good. I thought that kind of moved slow to me. The silos look different. That's kind of cool. The different looks of it. I still think the ZX Spectrum silos were my favorite overall. I just liked how it looked. Thought that was cool, that level on that machine. But this one's okay. Now here's the second stage. Looks very similar to all the others. Now the doors disappeared, so it's just changed and taken out altogether. I love how that falls like that. That's cool. Like that, right there where they're shooting the pup comes and it falls down. I thought that was very cool. So I give this one a big thumbs up. I liked the Amstrad version. It was fun to play, and it wasn't too hard for me to get to the different stages that I needed to get to be able to show you guys. And here's the last one. So here's the third stage in here, and I thought this one actually looks cool. I like this version of the throwing the disc. Just each one of them so unique and so different. So just very cool to check out these different systems and see how they came out and how the programmers did it. I hope you like it. I hope you enjoy these, seeing all these different systems. I think they're cool to me, is just because all I lived in was a Commodore 64 world, and now getting to see all these different systems to see how other people saw it it's just very, very cool to me.
So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed seeing all the different systems that Raid Over Moscow is on. I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed playing these different games and just seeing how the different versions looked. I always enjoyed doing these kind of videos and trying out these different games and different systems that I've never played them on before. It's always fun. Of course, there's always that struggle of trying to get out of that hangar and just not blowing up your ship when you're trying to blow it. Get out of there and make sure that you know the right key to open that door. So if you haven't subscribed yet, guys, go ahead and subscribe to Floppy Deep Dive. Give me some comments, check that you liked it, give me thumbs up if you liked this video, if you wanted to see some more of the many faces of and the different systems that they come on, and which games you would like to see. So until next time, thank you for joining me on another Floppy Deep Dive.